I watched Miranda graduate on a cracked Android screen smeared with disinfectant and regret. The live stream lagged every few seconds, pixelating her figure like the universe couldn't even give me the dignity of a clean view. She looked stunning in her wine-colored cap and gown, her curls pinned up the way she always did for moments that mattered. Her heels sparkled beneath the hem of the robe, new ones I hadn't seen before. Maybe she bought them with that secret credit card I'd only learned about 2 weeks ago. Maybe Royce bought them. I don't know. I don't think I want to know. I was in the supply closet of the night clinic, mop in hand, gloves stained from scrubbing the break room tiles. It was just after 10 p.m., my third shift of the day. I'd left the car wash after a 7-hour stretch, downed a protein bar in the parking lot, then busted straight to the diner for the dinner rush. They let me clock out early so I could make it to the clinic. I hadn't told anyone it was graduation day. What was the point? The only celebration I got was a cracked screen and a mop handle. She didn't even text me. Not a selfie. Not a "we did it." Nothing. But I still felt proud. Because I remembered all of it. The nights I slept in my work uniform, too tired to change. The mornings I made her coffee and quizzed her with flashcards while she did her makeup. The times I stood outside the courthouse in the freezing cold, waiting for her to finish volunteering so I could drive her home. I remembered the way she cried when she got her first exam results back, and how I took that pain like it was mine. Because it was. I didn't just support her, I carried her. I absorbed her pressure like a damn sponge. And for a long time, I didn't resent it. I grew up on the south side of the city where dreams didn't come easy, and love, real love, was supposed to be about sacrifice. That's what I believed. That's what I built everything on. I didn't have a degree. I didn't have connections. I didn't come from much. But I had discipline. I had grit. I had the kind of quiet strength that didn't ask for applause. So when Miranda said she wanted to go to law school, I didn't flinch. I picked up a second job. Then a third. I pawned my laptop to pay for her LSAT prep. I sold my dad's watch to cover her application fees. When scholarships fell through, I told her, we'll figure it out. And by we, I meant me. But when her name was called and she stepped across that stage, something in me cracked, something I'd been ignoring for years. She never looked into the camera. She didn't wave or mouth thank you or even glance in my direction like she knew I'd be watching from a janitor's closet 12 miles across town. I stood there holding that mop like a fool, waiting for a moment of acknowledgement that never came. And when she threw that cap into the air with the rest of her class, I felt it now. Sharp and cruel, like a quiet funeral for the version of me that thought love meant being invisible. That night, I walked home. The buses were delayed, and I didn't have the energy to wait. I walked through the same neighborhoods I used to dream in, past the same broken streetlights and boarded-up storefronts. I passed the corner where I'd proposed to her after her undergrad graduation, kneeling in the rain with a ring I'd saved 6 months for. She cried that day, told me I made her feel safe, that she wanted to build a life with someone like me. I didn't realize then that someone like me was just a phase. I got home around midnight. She wasn't there. Her cap and gown weren't hanging on the closet door. Her suitcase, our suitcase, was gone. No note, no voicemail, just silence. I sat on the edge of the bed, sweaty and sore, my uniform reeking of bleach and burgers. I stared at the spot on the floor where we used to sit and eat takeout when money was tight. Where she once looked at me and said, "Even if we lose everything, I'm glad I have you." Lies age like milk. And yet, I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't smash anything, though God knows the temptation pulsed in my fingers. Instead, I opened my Dropbox and reviewed what I'd started compiling 6 months ago, the receipts, the transfers, the loan applications I co-signed, and then paid off myself when the repayments mysteriously landed on my credit score. Every bit of it, organized, labeled, and date-stamped. A legal blueprint of sacrifice. I didn't know what I was going to do with it yet, but something in my gut told me I would need it. The last thing I did that night was replay the live stream. Just once. Just to confirm it wasn't all in my head. That she never looked for the camera. Never even pretended to remember who stood behind her the whole time. That's when it hit me. The moment she threw that cap in the air, I stopped being part of the dream. My role had ended. The curtain had dropped. I was no longer the man she needed. Just the man who paid the bill. And somewhere, beneath the exhaustion and the ache, I felt the first flicker of something I hadn't let myself feel in years. Not bitterness. Not heartbreak. Clarity. She thought my value was tied to what I could do for her. But she'd made a mistake. Because while she graduated into a spotlight, I was just getting started. It was supposed to be a celebration dinner. That's what Miranda had called it when she texted me the address earlier that week. Just a small, quiet dinner between the two of us, her words. I'd imagined something cozy, maybe a place we'd been before, one of those hole-in-the-wall joints where the tables wobbled and the waiters knew our names. Somewhere warm. Familiar. But when I pulled up to the address, I had to double-check the street signs. The restaurant had a name I couldn't pronounce. Some sleek, Michelin-starred place with valet parking and oversized glass doors that opened like a portal to another world. I didn't even know how she got a reservation. The lighting was dim in that rich people way, more for mood than visibility. I stepped in wearing the best thing I owned, a navy button-down and the blazer she'd bought me last year for her law firm mixer. She once said it made me look respectable. She was already seated when I arrived. A small table by the window. The city behind her shimmered like a promise. And she looked like someone who belonged in that promise. Her dress hugged her like it had been stitched directly onto her skin. Elegant, expensive, and definitely new. Her hair was curled in that perfect, time-consuming way. Her heels, the ones I now recognized from graduation, tapped lightly under the table as I approached. She didn't stand to greet me, just offered a tight smile and a sip of wine. "Glad you made it," she said, as if I'd been late. I wasn't. "Congratulations again," I said, sliding into the chair across from her. I wanted to reach for her hand, but something in her posture made it clear this wasn't that kind of dinner. The waiter came, and she ordered a second glass before I even looked at the menu. I ordered water, not because I couldn't afford wine, but because I wanted to be clear-headed. Something in the air felt off. She made small talk, told me about a few of her classmates who landed job offers, about a panel discussion she might be attending in D.C., about some lawyer named Pharaoh who took notice of her class performance. I nodded and smiled, said I was proud. And I was, somewhere beneath the rising static in my chest. Then the wine glass made that gentle ring against her plate as she set it down. She folded her napkin in half. Too neatly. Too rehearsed. And looked up at me with the kind of expression someone uses when delivering a diagnosis they know will hurt. "You've been amazing, Liam," she said softly. "Truly. You've been the most supportive person in my life." That word, been, echoed. Past tense. I waited. But I can't afford to stay married to someone with just a high school diploma. She said it so calmly, like she was discussing a budget cut or ending a subscription. No bite. No hesitation. Just efficient. I stared at her. Not angry. Not heartbroken. Just suddenly very, very awake. "So this is about ambition," I said. My voice was steady, but I could feel the weight of those years pressing against my ribs. "About matching ambition. It's about alignment," she said, as if she were on a podcast. "About shared values and growth. We're just in different places now." I nodded slowly. Different places. I thought of the clinic floor I'd mopped during her graduation, the trays I'd carried at the diner, the Freon I'd inhaled at the car wash. Different places. "You don't even seem surprised," she added. A hint of annoyance now, like I wasn't playing my part properly. That's when I smiled. Not big. Just enough. Because I had already seen it. 2 nights earlier, I'd borrowed her tablet to check the news, and a flight confirmation popped up in the email preview. Paris. First class. Departing Tuesday. The passenger names? Miranda Quinn and Royce Delano. I didn't even open it. I didn't need to. I had heard her whisper his name on a call she thought I was asleep during. Had seen how she started locking her phone. How she began spending more nights at the library even after graduation. I'd seen the shift, the soft distance that came with someone already emotionally boarding a plane. But I hadn't said a word. Not then. Not now. "I'm happy for you," I said instead. She blinked. That threw her. "You don't have to pretend, Liam. I know this is hard." I leaned back, folded my arms. "I've done hard. This is clarity." She frowned slightly, then turned her attention to her wine like it held the answers I wouldn't give her. "I just think you deserve someone who understands where you're headed," she said. "Someone who—" "Who what?" I interrupted. "Wears cufflinks? Has a degree? Knows how to order foie gras?" She didn't answer. Just kept folding that napkin. "You made it," I said. "You're the star now. Just don't forget who held the light for you when you couldn't see." "I won't," she whispered. I believe that part. Maybe the only part. The check came, and she reached for it without hesitation. "I got it," she said. "Of course you do," I replied. When we stepped outside, the night air had cooled. She hugged her arms around herself, suddenly not so radiant under the streetlights. She leaned in, kissed my cheek. "Thank you for everything, Liam. I really mean that." "Safe travels," I said. Her brows twitched for just a second, barely a pause. Then she walked toward the rideshare waiting at the curb. I watched her leave, not as a man abandoned, not as a husband betrayed, but as a man who had done everything right and still ended up written out of the narrative. But what she didn't know, what she hadn't even bothered to ask, was that I wasn't just walking away empty-handed. I was walking away with something powerful. Receipts. Records. Proof. She saw a diploma as a passport. I saw it as evidence. And the courtroom of life? It hadn't even opened yet. Tuesday morning came with a gray sky and quiet air, the kind of weather that felt like the city was holding its breath. I stood by the door, keys in hand, watching Miranda zip up the designer suitcase she used to borrow from her friend Rochelle. Now it was hers. I had a feeling a lot of things were hers now. She looked poised, polished, untouchable in a beige coat I didn't recognize, probably Royce's doing. She hadn't said much to me that morning, just that she needed a ride. No, can you? No, would you mind? Just expectation. I didn't argue. I drove her. The drive to the airport was mostly silent, save for the occasional directions from the GPS she already knew by heart. She sat in the passenger seat like a guest in someone else's car, scrolling through her phone, lips slightly parted as she smirked at whatever she was reading. Probably a message from Royce. Probably something like, "See you at the gate. Beautiful." I caught her reflection in the window. She didn't look back at me once. Just kept her eyes forward, as if her past sat in the rear view and she didn't need it anymore. At the terminal, I pulled up to the curb, put the car in park, and stepped out to get her bag. She didn't wait. She was already opening her door, already moving like she had done this before, like I was just one last step in a checklist. And then I saw him. Royce Delano. Tall, smug, confident in that effortless, expensive way. His coat looked custom, and his smile had the kind of ease you only wear when you've never had to mop a floor at midnight. He stood near the glass doors, holding Miranda's second coat, the red one with gold buttons she hadn't worn around me. His posture said everything. He wasn't here to meet her. He was here to claim her. She walked right to him. No hesitation. No backward glance. "Have a good trip," I said, my voice even controlled. Miranda paused, just slightly, and turned around. Her face softened. "Thank you for everything, Liam. I really mean that." She kissed my cheek, and for a second, I almost let myself feel it. Almost. But it felt like someone else's wife brushing by. Someone else's life. I nodded. I even smiled. Then I got back in the car and watched her walk through those sliding glass doors like she was walking into a new world. Royce touched the small of her back as they disappeared beyond the checkpoint. I drove off slowly, letting the silence settle, letting the truth root itself in my gut. She was gone, and that was fine, because what she didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that everything I'd done for her had been documented. Not out of spite, not even at first, but because I knew deep down that people forget sacrifices when they're no longer convenient. So I made sure I wouldn't be forgotten. The Dropbox folder was called Quinn Tuition. Every loan payment I made, every wire transfer, every tuition invoice, housing deposit, textbook order, meal plan. Even the weekend I borrowed against my own car title to cover her late fees. There was a scanned copy, time-stamped, organized, legal. I had started collecting them in year one, back when we were broke and hopeful and thought we were building something together. I saved them thinking one day we'd laugh about it, maybe show our kids how much we sacrificed. But that folder had become something else. It was now the story of how I built someone's empire and got evicted before the ribbon cutting. I sent it that afternoon. Not to Miranda, not to Royce, but to Camille Soto, managing partner at Hallstrom & Knox, the firm Miranda was set to join in just 2 weeks. Camille had sent Miranda a congratulatory email after the bar results came in. Miranda had left the tab open on her tablet the night she fell asleep on the couch. I remembered the name. I found Camille's firm bio online, found her contact info, sent a polite, professional message explaining that I had questions about financial sponsorship, legal ethics, and potential conflict of interest implications for a new associate who had secured private educational funding from a spouse, while secretly preparing for divorce. I attached a copy of the folder, every receipt, every loan document. I didn't frame it with anger. I framed it with clarity. Facts, timelines, intentions. Within 10 minutes, I received a read receipt. 20 more, and she replied, "Thank you, Mr. Quinn. Could we schedule a call later this week?" I replied immediately, "Absolutely." And just like that, the narrative shifted. Because people like Royce see life in terms of upgrades. They don't look behind them. And people like Miranda, once they climb high enough, forget the faces of those who held the ladder. But I didn't want revenge. Not exactly. I wanted something else, acknowledgement. A record. A voice in the room that had gone silent the moment she passed the bar. That night, I went back to work at the diner. I tied my apron, wiped down the counters, and took my shift like it was any other Tuesday. But it wasn't. Because now I knew something they didn't. While she was clinking champagne glasses at 30,000 feet, her past had just arrived neatly packaged in the inbox of a managing partner. And my story? It was just beginning to get interesting. 3 days after she left for Paris, I got the call while replacing a busted sink pipe in the back of the diner. My hands were soaked, the wrench slick with soap and hot water, when my phone vibrated in my back pocket. I almost let it go to voicemail. It was an unfamiliar number, area code from New York. Probably spam, I thought. But something in me told me to pick up. "Mr. Quinn?" A woman's voice asked, crisp, confident, professional. "Yes. This is Liam. This is Camille Soto, managing partner at Hallstrom & Knox." I straightened up slowly, heart tapping against my ribs. I glanced around, half expecting someone to jump out and tell me this was a prank. But the voice in my ear was all business, all precision. She didn't waste time. "I'd like to discuss the documents you sent regarding Miranda Quinn. Do you have a few minutes?" I set the wrench down on the edge of the sink, wiped my hands on my apron, and stepped into the hallway, trying to find somewhere quiet. The fryer hissed in the background. Laughter drifted in from the front of house. But in that moment, everything else faded. "I have more than a few," I said. "I've been waiting for this call." There was a pause, not awkward, measured. "Mr. Quinn, thank you for the detail in your documentation. It's extensive and, frankly, concerning. We take potential conflicts of interest very seriously, particularly with new associates whose backgrounds require full transparency." She was careful with her words, as lawyers always are. But I could hear the shift in her tone, the quiet edge that meant something was already in motion behind the scenes. "You mentioned that you covered her tuition in full?" "Yes," I said. "Every dollar. From LSAT prep to her bar registration. It's all in there. She applied for scholarships, was denied. I took on extra work to make up the difference. We were married during the entirety of her academic career. And she never disclosed any of this during onboarding?" Camille asked. "Not to my knowledge. She was already planning to leave me months before graduation. She just didn't want to interfere with her career." Another pause. This one heavier. "Would you be willing to provide a sworn affidavit confirming your financial support?" Camille asked. "I've already drafted one," I said. "Signed and dated. I can email it to you right now." She exhaled, just slightly. "Please do. We'll also be passing this along to our ethics committee. I can't say what actions will be taken until they review everything formally, but I appreciate your cooperation." "Of course," I replied. "I'm not trying to destroy her career, Ms. Soto. But I wasn't just a footnote. I want the record to show the truth." "That's reasonable," she said. "And Mr. Quinn?" "Yeah. You've handled this with far more grace than most would. We'll be in touch soon." I hung up the call in the alley behind the diner, leaning against a wall that smelled faintly of burnt oil and lemon cleaner. I stood there for a long minute, staring at the clouds overhead. For the first time in months, the weight in my chest shifted, just a little. Later that night, while wiping down booths, I got a notification on my phone. Miranda had posted a photo from Paris, the Louvre. She stood in front of the iconic glass pyramid, holding Royce's hand, a glass of champagne in the other. Her caption: "Upgrade your circle. Upgrade your life." My thumb hovered over the screen. I liked the post. I didn't comment. Didn't send a message. Just left the little heart floating there like a stamp. Let her see it. Let her wonder. The next morning, I emailed Camille the affidavit. Attached a copy of our marriage certificate, too. I even included screenshots of the texts Miranda had sent me during her first semester, messages like, "I couldn't do this without you," and "Thank you for being my everything." They weren't bitter. They were proof. I wasn't trying to burn her life down. I was just making sure no one tried to erase me from the story I helped build. That night, as I sat on the back steps of my apartment eating leftover takeout, I thought about the years I'd spent shaping my life around hers. All the little sacrifices that had become so routine I stopped noticing them. Working late, skipping doctor appointments, wearing shoes until the soles wore thin. I had done it without resentment, until she made it clear I no longer had value in her world. But that phone call shifted something. It wasn't just about justice. It was about being seen, being respected. I didn't need revenge. I needed restoration. And this was the beginning of it. I spent the rest of the week working my usual shifts, fixing the same sinks, scrubbing the same floors, clocking in and out like always. But my spine was a little straighter. My steps just a touch firmer. Because somewhere in a glass building in New York, someone had finally listened. Someone who could make sure my sacrifices didn't get swallowed in someone else's success story. 2 days later, I got a text from Miranda. "Did you talk to my firm?" I stared at it for a while. Let it sit. Then I wrote back. I answer questions. I told the truth. She replied almost instantly. "You ruined me." I read the words, not with anger or guilt, but with clarity. So I typed, "No, you did that when you forgot who paid your tuition." She didn't respond. I didn't expect her to. But deep down, I knew what was coming. Miranda had spent years climbing a ladder I built. She'd packed her bags, kissed my cheek like a favor, and disappeared into a new life without ever thinking the past might reach forward and tap her on the shoulder. Well, it had. And now, the story was no longer hers alone. It was mine too. And I had just found my voice. The call came just before sunrise. I was at the construction yard, checking the delivery manifests, high-visibility vest zipped to my chin and steel-toe boots damp from last night's rain. My phone buzzed in my chest pocket. I saw Miranda's name flash on the screen. Strange. We hadn't spoken since the text exchange after her Paris post. I stared at the screen a second longer than I should have. My thumb hovered, then I hit accept. "Hello, Liam." Her voice was sharp, clipped, frayed at the edges. "What's going on?" "You know exactly what's going on," she hissed. I didn't say anything. I just listened to the sound of her panic crackling through the line. "They pulled my internship offer," she said, voice rising. "Hellstrom and Knox. Gone. Just like that. They said there were ethical concerns. Do you know what that means in this industry? Do you have any idea what you've done?" I looked up at the gray clouds rolling in over the site. "I didn't do anything but tell the truth." "You sent them everything," she snapped. "Every receipt, every email, every text like some bitter ex. You destroyed my reputation before it even started." I leaned against a concrete column, the cold seeping into my back, steadying me. "You mean the reputation you built while erasing the person who got you there?" "I earned my degree, Liam." "You did, but you didn't pay for it. And you didn't tell the firm that the man who funded it all was the same man you were planning to divorce mid-contract. You think firms like that want that kind of drama attached to them?" "I didn't think it was relevant." "That's the problem, Miranda. You didn't think I was relevant." There was a pause. The kind that stretches so long, you can hear the person trying to come up with a version of the truth they can live with. "You always said you wanted me to succeed." "I did. And I still do. But not by erasing me from the picture and pretending I didn't build the frame." She was breathing harder now. I could hear it, the tremble, the anger wrapped in disbelief. "I told you I wanted a clean break. And you should have waited until after the ink was dry on your offer letter," I said. "You don't get to use someone's back as a bridge, then blow it up the second you cross it." I needed to move on, Liam. I needed to stop carrying dead weight. There it was. Dead weight. I stared out across the scaffolding, jaw tight. "And now you're free falling. I can't believe you're doing this to me." I laughed quietly. Not out of cruelty, out of disbelief. "You really think I'm doing something to you? Miranda, I drove you to the airport knowing you were leaving me for someone else. I let you kiss my cheek like I was some loyal bellboy who'd overstayed his usefulness. I was silent. I gave you that much. Because you were planning this all along. No, I was planning to disappear. Quietly. With dignity. Until you decided to pretend I never existed. Until you put your new life on a pedestal and stomped on the one we had. I didn't expose you. I just refused to lie for you." Silence again. And then, softer, almost broken, she said, "You've ruined me." I didn't respond right away. I walked back toward the job trailer, the cold morning wind tugging at my sleeves. Inside, the foreman was laying out blueprints. I gave him a nod and stepped aside. "No," I said finally. "You did that when you treated your husband like a phase. Like a stepping stone." I just held up the mirror. Do you know what people are going to say? She whispered. Yeah, I said. They're going to say maybe she should have married someone who didn't keep receipts. The line went dead. She hung up. I stood there for a long moment, phone still in hand, heart still steady. Not triumphant, not gloating, just clear. This wasn't revenge. This was balance being restored. Later that day, I heard through a friend that Royce had unfollowed her on social media, that their Paris photos were gone, that his family, old money, image-obsessed, traditional, didn't take kindly to scandal. Especially not ones involving legal firms and public ethics boards. She had bet on a future built on appearances. But when those appearances cracked, the whole thing unraveled. That night, she called again. I didn't pick up. She sent a text. Please, can we talk? I ignored it. She sent another one the next morning. I didn't think it would fall apart like this. I believed that. I even felt a flicker of sympathy. Brief. Human. But sympathy wasn't a reason to self-destruct. Not again. Instead of replying, I opened my Dropbox and added the final screenshot, a notice from Hallstrom and Knox's ethics board formally stating that Miranda's internship offer had been withdrawn due to a violation of disclosure protocols and perceived conflict of interest. I filed it under the folder I had renamed, The Truth You Didn't Expect. That evening, as I walked home, I passed a window display at a bookstore. A framed quote caught my eye. I stopped, stared at it. The axe forgets. The tree remembers. I had been the tree for too long, silent, rooted, taking blow after blow without breaking. Now I was the one holding the axe. But I wasn't swinging wildly. I was carving space. For truth. For dignity. For myself. And as her world shrank and her name dimmed from the list of rising stars, I didn't cheer. I didn't laugh. I just kept walking. Forward. I filed the divorce papers on a Monday morning. No fanfare, no confrontation, no explanation. Just a quiet signature at the corner of a legal office I used to walk Miranda to when she interned for a public defender. I knew every inch of that office, its dusty air, its water-stained ceiling tiles, even the way the front desk lady squinted when she asked you to spell your name. Funny how many places I'd once entered to support her were now the exact locations I walked into to let her go. I didn't hire a new lawyer. I called Saul. The same one who helped us with Miranda's school loan deferrals back when we couldn't afford a missed payment. He used to call us the Scrappy Quins. Always fighting uphill, always hand in hand. I wondered if he still thought of us that way. When I called and told him what happened, he didn't sound surprised. I've seen it before, he said with a long sigh. Ambition with no loyalty? It eats everything in its path. I'm not interested in punishment, I told him. Just fairness. Well, you've got every receipt to back your claim. That's more than most. He didn't ask for a retainer. Said he'd take the filing fee from whatever Miranda ended up owing me in the settlement. You're not vindictive, Liam, he added before hanging up. You're just done. That makes all the difference. Done. I didn't know how good that word would feel until I heard it out loud. I left the office and drove straight to the apartment. The one Miranda and I used to share, but hadn't lived in together for weeks before she left for Paris. Her side of the closet was mostly empty now. Her perfume was gone. The bookshelf had gaps where her law texts used to sit like trophies. The space felt like the ghost of a marriage, hollow but not yet cold. Still clinging to the scent of arguments and misplaced hopes. I walked through each room slowly, not in mourning, but in inventory. There wasn't much I wanted to take with me. Just a couple of framed photos, ones where I still recognized the woman I married, and a vintage turntable I'd saved for 2 birthdays to buy. I packed my duffel bag carefully. My clothes, my records, and the shoebox filled with notes and receipts, proof of what I gave, what I carried, what I let her become. That same afternoon, I signed a lease on a new apartment. Smaller, cleaner. 2nd floor with a view of the old train tracks. No washer-dryer in unit, no rooftop deck. But it was mine. No one else's name on the lease. No shared closet. No echo of dismissive sighs or tired declarations of how I just didn't understand her anymore. I moved in that evening with the help of Victor, my foreman at the construction site, and the closest thing I had to a mentor. This place has character, he said, clapping me on the back as we hauled the last box upstairs. Character and creaky pipes, I muttered. He laughed. Sounds like me. Once we were settled, Victor cracked open 2 bottles of cheap beer and handed me one. You know, he said, not many men walk away from something like that without losing their damn mind. I almost did, I admitted. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. But you didn't. And that means something. I stared around my new apartment, still bare, but filled with possibility. No longer a holding cell for someone else's dreams. Just space. Honest space. Quiet and uncomplicated. Over the next few days, the world moved on. People still ordered takeout. My shifts still came and went. The sun still rose. And Miranda's name, once a rising star in our little community, started fading from conversations. Saul told me her parents had called him, furious about the divorce and the financial claims I filed. They said you were humiliating her, he told me. She humiliated herself, I said flatly. Exactly, he replied. They offered to settle quickly, quietly. Tried to pay me off with a lump sum that didn't even touch what I'd poured into her education. I declined. We weren't negotiating over emotion anymore. This was math. Cold and simple. In the divorce petition, I listed every tuition payment, every deferred cost, every expense covered with my income. Framed them not as gifts, but as spousal investments. That language mattered. It gave weight to the truth. Saul made sure it stuck. She's going to scream when she reads this, he said with a smirk. Let her, I replied. That Friday, I stood outside my new building, watching the city lights shimmer against the dusk. My phone buzzed again, Miranda. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Instead, I opened the envelope that had arrived from Saul earlier that day. Inside was the formal notice of filing. Divorce petition stamped and recorded. One clean break. One clean beginning. That night, I unpacked the shoebox. I laid out the first tuition receipt. The smallest one. Only a few $100s. I'd paid it in cash after a double shift, my fingertips still raw from scrubbing fryer grease. I had smiled when I handed it over at the campus office. Thought I was paying for both our futures. No, it was just a relic. A reminder. I pinned it to the corkboard above my desk. Not as revenge. As proof that I gave everything I had. And now, I was ready to give to myself. The chapter with Miranda had closed not with an explosion, but with precision. Measured. Undeniable. And though the house we shared had crumbled, the one I was building now, brick by brick, truth by truth, stood on solid ground. I didn't know where this new life would take me yet, but I knew this much. I would never be someone's stepping stone again. Not ever. It was exactly 13 days after I filed the divorce papers that she came back. No grand announcement. No call ahead. Just a missed FaceTime attempt in the middle of my shift, followed by a short, strange text. Landed early. Can we talk? I didn't answer. I was on break, sitting on a concrete step behind the construction site with a sandwich in one hand and blueprints in the other. The sky had turned that washed out gray again, the kind that made the city feel like it was holding its breath. I stared at her message until the screen went dark. Then I shoved my phone back in my pocket and took another bite of my sandwich. She hadn't said anything when she left. No final apology, no thank you beyond that polished cheek kiss at the terminal. But now, here she was, grounded and trying to dial back the clock. I didn't bite. That night, after my shift, Victor and I grabbed dinner at a small spot near the job site. Cheap wings. No music. Just the sound of beer bottles clinking and the hum of distant traffic. She's back? I said quietly as I stared at my untouched plate. Victor raised a brow. The lawyer? I nodded. What does she want? She wants to talk. You gonna let her? I don't think there's anything left to say. Victor leaned back in his chair, beer in hand. You ever seen a wasp nest get knocked out of a tree? I shook my head. They buzz around for a while. Lost. Angry. Looking for something to sting. Doesn't mean you need to stand still. I let that settle. It sounded like something my father would have said, had he been around. The next morning, I found her standing outside my new apartment. I spotted her through the blinds. Miranda in a plain trench coat, no makeup, hair pulled back. No heels. Just sneakers. The kind of shoes you wear when you've been walking longer than you planned. She didn't knock. Just stood there, arms crossed, her phone in her hand like she wasn't sure if calling me again would make this better or worse. I didn't open the door. Not immediately. I watched her from behind the curtain. There was something strange about seeing her like that. Not as the polished woman who walked into firm interviews with confidence or the version of her twirling under Parisian lights with Royce's hand in hers. This was someone unraveling. 10 minutes passed before I finally opened the door. She looked up like she'd been waiting her entire life for it. Hey, she said softly. I didn't move. You lost. No, she said, voice tighter. Just tired. I stepped back slightly. A gesture, not an invitation. She walked in like the air itself would push her back if she hesitated too long. I watched her scan the apartment, the unpacked boxes, the modest couch, the photo of my mom still in bubble wrap on the side table. "It's quiet in here," she said. "That's the point." She nodded, rubbing her hands together like she needed something to do with them. I waited. Finally, she looked at me. Her eyes were rimmed with fatigue, her voice barely audible. "He left me." I didn't say a word. "Royce," she continued, like I didn't already know who she meant. "At the airport. Just handed me my suitcase and walked away. Said I brought too much drama into his life." I exhaled slowly through my nose. She gave a weak laugh. "Guess that whole upgrade your circle thing had a time limit." I didn't smile. She cleared her throat. "My parents won't speak to me. They think I embarrassed the family. Said I jeopardized their name. My cousin called me a cautionary tale. I'm getting rejection emails from firms I never even applied to." Her voice cracked. "I messed up." Still, I said nothing. "I know you don't owe me anything, Liam. I know that. But I just needed to say I'm sorry." I finally looked at her. "What are you sorry for?" She blinked. "Leaving." She nodded. "For how you left?" She nodded again, slower this time. "For making me feel like a disposable draft of your real life?" That made her flinch. "I was scared," she whispered. "No," I said calmly. "You were selfish. You thought you could outrun your past and rewrite your future in a language that didn't include me. You turned me into a stepping stone and then tried to pretend you never stepped. I was afraid of being better than you." That stopped me cold. She must have seen the expression on my face, because she hurried to explain. "I mean, I didn't know how to succeed without leaving something behind. And you were always there, always constant, and I thought I had to cut ties to grow. But the truth is, without you, I'm nothing." I nodded once, slowly. Then I stepped aside, turned, and grabbed something from my desk drawer. I handed it to her, a manila envelope with her name printed neatly on the front. Inside were photocopies of every tuition bill I had paid, color-coded, itemized. A small note clipped to the top. "Paid in full. Not by you. Never again." She stared at it for a long time. Then she looked up at me. "Is this everything? It's all yours. All the proof. All the weight you left behind. You don't have to carry it, but you don't get to forget it, either." Tears welled in her eyes. "Do you hate me?" I shook my head. "No. Hating you would mean I still gave you power. I'm just finished." She looked around one last time, maybe searching for a part of herself that still belonged. But there was nothing here for her anymore. Not a photo, not a memory, just space and peace. She didn't try to hug me. I think she knew better. She walked to the door, paused, and whispered, "Goodbye, Liam." I nodded. "Take care, Miranda." And that was it. She left, quietly. No final look over the shoulder. No last desperate plea. Just silence. It was the last time I saw her. But it wasn't the last time I saw her shadow. Because after someone like Miranda, peace feels unfamiliar at first. But then it begins to bloom. In the way mornings are calm. In how your name tastes when you say it out loud without apology. In knowing you gave everything and lost nothing that was truly yours. And when the door clicked shut behind her, it felt like an entire chapter of my life took its final breath. And I let it go. I didn't celebrate. There was no dramatic toast or Instagram post with some smug caption about starting over. I didn't need validation from the world. I'd spent too long being invisible beside someone who needed the spotlight like oxygen. No, my revenge didn't come wrapped in champagne bottles or front row seats. It came in the silence of purpose, in sweat, in steel, in cement. I started night school a week after Miranda left my apartment. Civil engineering. 3 nights a week, 6 to 9. Community college for now, nothing flashy, but real, tangible, and mine. My mornings still belonged to the construction site, where I worked under Victor. My afternoons were for hauling, lifting, leading. But at night, I slipped into a classroom that smelled like old erasers and possibility, and I started building something new. Victor was the one who made it happen. He'd seen me studying blueprint layouts one afternoon on my lunch break and asked, "You ever thought about going further with this?" I shrugged. "Thought about it, sure. But time and money." He cut me off. "I've seen how you work. You don't just follow plans. You think ahead. That's rare. You've got a mind for this." He pulled out a folded pamphlet from his back pocket. "Community grant program. Night courses. Scholarships. Guys like you," he said, "don't just survive. You evolve." And I believed him. That night, I filled out the application, half expecting it to go nowhere. But 2 weeks later, I was sitting in a classroom surrounded by people with tired eyes and hopeful notebooks, all of us trying to carve out something better for ourselves. We didn't have time to chase dreams. We built them with leftover hours. I didn't tell anyone about it. Not my old co-workers at the diner, not the guys at the site, not even my mother when I called her that weekend to check in. This was just for me. Quiet work. Internal scaffolding. I wasn't interested in proving anything anymore. Just becoming. Meanwhile, I kept hearing things about Miranda. Not directly. The whispers floated in, little birds with sad songs. She'd been dropped from Hallstrom and Knox completely. Her name had quietly vanished from the associate roster. One of her friends from law school posted something cryptic about betrayal and brand damage, then deleted it 2 hours later. Another friend of hers, Rochelle, bumped into me at the grocery store. We exchanged polite smiles. I was wearing my construction vest and holding a bag of rice. "She's not doing well," Rochelle said suddenly, eyes darting around. I didn't respond. I just grabbed a can of beans off the shelf. She moved back with her parents. "They're not exactly being gentle." Still, I said nothing. "She asked about you," she added. "Wanted to know if you were okay." I gave a short nod. "I'm better than okay." Rochelle tilted her head. "You always were the solid one." I paid for my groceries and walked out. I didn't feel like the solid one. Not always. But now? I was building strength in places no one could take from me again. My new apartment had started to feel more like a home. I bought a desk off a guy on Facebook Marketplace and set it by the window. That's where I studied every night, lamp tilted low, pencil grip tight as I sketched pipe layouts and concrete reinforcements. I started dreaming again. Not about love or revenge, but structures, buildings, roads. The kind of permanence that came from math and effort, not promises. One night, after a long day at work and a midterm that fried my brain, I stood in the mirror and barely recognized myself. My face was leaner, my eyes clearer. I wasn't dragging the weight of someone else's ambition behind me anymore. I was rising. Quietly. Ruthlessly. I started saving every extra dollar. Cut out anything unnecessary. No takeout, no weekend trips, no splurges. My mind was focused. I wanted to finish the certification and get licensed. From there, a site manager role. Maybe even start my own firm someday. Victor told me he'd help when the time came. "You've got a name people will follow," he said. It was the first time in a long time that I believed my name had value. And I didn't need anyone else's last name attached to it to give it weight. My professor, Ms. Inzi, called me after class one evening and said, "Liam, your work is clean. Structured. There's discipline here. That's not something you teach. It's something you earn." I thanked her, and when I walked home that night, I thought about how many years I'd spent being seen only as dependable, useful, a platform for someone else's leap. And yet, here I was, leaping for myself, and not once looking down. That weekend, I volunteered with a community rebuild project on the east side of the city. Low-income housing renovation. Families that reminded me of my own. I helped pour foundation, taught a few high schoolers how to read plans. One of the kids said, "You a real engineer?" I smiled. "Not yet. But you will be?" "Yeah," I said. "I will be." And it hit me how powerful that was. Not, "I want to be." Not, "I might be." But, "I will." With no one holding the reins but me. Back at home, I opened the drawer where I'd kept all the remnants of my marriage. The receipts. The notes. The old photos. I didn't throw them away. I didn't need to. They weren't poison anymore. Just evidence of a man who gave, and gave, and gave. And then learned how to give to himself. I moved them into a labeled box and stored it in the closet. Out of sight. Not out of mind. Miranda hadn't reached out again. No emails. No calls. Just silence. Maybe she finally understood that not every bridge burns with a bang. Some just drop behind you until you try to return and find nothing there but fog. And me? I was already standing on a new road. Blueprint in hand. Hard hat on. Heart light. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of what came next. Because this time, the foundation was mine. This time, I wasn't building for someone else's dream. I was constructing my own. It was a Friday afternoon, late spring, when Miranda showed up at the job site. The sun was high and unforgiving, casting a sharp glare off the concrete foundation we'd poured earlier that week. I was marking off utility trenches with Victor, both of us sweating through our shirts, when I heard a voice call out my name. "Liam." I turned, slow, like the heat had thickened my reflexes. But it wasn't the heat. It was her, Miranda, standing just beyond the temporary fencing in flats and a wrinkled blouse, hair loosely pinned back, no makeup, and something else I hadn't seen in her since before law school: uncertainty. She looked tired. Not the worn-out tired from overwork, but the kind that settled in your bones after a series of choices you can't undo. She didn't wave, didn't smile. She just stood there, fingers gripping the strap of her purse like it was anchoring her. Victor raised an eyebrow at me. "You need a minute?" I handed him the marker and dusted off my gloves. "Yeah, I'll be back." I walked to the gate slowly, my boots kicking up dust. I didn't rush. I wanted her to feel the full weight of the moment, that she wasn't in control anymore, that I was no longer someone waiting for her to decide what I was worth. She waited patiently, as never leaving me, until I reached her. She opened her mouth like she had a speech ready, then closed it. "What are you doing here?" I asked, tone neutral, even. No anger, no warmth. "I needed to see you. You could have called. You haven't answered." "Exactly." She exhaled and looked down at the dirt like she was embarrassed. "Can we talk?" I looked back toward the site. My crew was still working, Victor now motioning for the backhoe to shift. We were building something real, something with weight, something that didn't vanish when you turned your back. "We're talking," I said. "I mean, privately. I don't do private with you anymore." That landed. She flinched, then tried again. "Please." I motioned to a shady spot beneath a tree by the edge of the lot. She followed, her flats crunching on gravel. We stood apart, me with my arms folded, her shifting like she wasn't sure if she wanted to stay or run. "I was stupid," she said finally, voice thin and fragile. "I made the biggest mistake of my life." I didn't respond. "I was afraid," she continued. "Afraid that if I stayed with you, I'd never feel like I'd made it. Like I'd be tethered to the version of myself who had to work 2 jobs and beg for scholarship money." "And now?" I asked. She shrugged, a brittle laugh escaping her lips. "Now I'm jobless, back living with my parents, and Royce is a memory I can't even get angry at because I chose him." I walked into that. "Yeah," I said quietly. "You did." She looked at me for a long time, searching for something. Maybe a flicker of the old Liam, the one who made her coffee at 5 a.m., who held her hand outside test rooms, who memorized the names of her professors just to make her smile. "Liam, I don't have excuses. Just regret. You were the best part of my life, and I was too proud to see it, too eager to be someone bigger, and I convinced myself I had to leave you to do that." I stayed silent, let her unravel. "But the truth is," she said, voice catching, "without you, I'm nothing." That's when I nodded. Not bitterly, not triumphantly, just with understanding. "You said it yourself," I replied. "You couldn't afford to stay married to someone like me." Her eyes glistened. "I didn't mean it." "You did," I cut in. "And that's okay. It's good, even, because it showed me everything I needed to know." She stepped closer. "Can we just start over? Even just as friends?" "No," I said calmly. "Why not?" I gestured toward the site behind me. "Because I'm building something. Something that doesn't have space for what we were. And definitely not for what you tried to make me into." Her lip trembled. "So that's it. That's it." She swallowed hard, then nodded. "You've changed. I've grown. I don't know if I'll ever stop regretting this," she whispered. "That's not my burden anymore." She stared at the ground again, like the dirt might offer her a way out. But there wasn't one. Not this time. Not for me. I gave her a moment. Let the silence do its work. Then I turned to leave. She didn't follow. She didn't call my name. I walked back toward the crew, toward the scaffolding and noise and sweat and progress. As I got closer, Victor handed me a cold bottle of water without a word. I cracked it open, took a long drink, and got back to work. Later that evening, when the site emptied and the sun began its descent, I sat on the hood of my car and watched the structure slowly rising from the foundation. Each bolt, each beam, each line on the blueprint now had new meaning. They weren't just part of a job, they were symbols of the life I was reclaiming. A life of my own making. That was the last time I saw Miranda. She faded out like a shadow at sunset, once looming, now barely there. And in her absence, I found something I'd been missing all along. Wholeness. Not in spite of the pain. Because of it. There's something final about a diploma arriving in the mail. It doesn't come with a marching band or applause. Just a plain envelope, your name spelled out in careful serif, and a moment of stillness when you realize you've crossed a line you thought was meant only for others. Mine came on a Thursday morning, tucked between a bank statement and a furniture catalog I never subscribed to. I held it for a long time before I opened it. My name, Liam Quinn, in gold letters at the top. Certificate in Civil Engineering Foundations. Completion. Certification. It wasn't a full degree, not yet. But it was mine. Paid for by my own labor, earned on my own terms, with not a cent of it traced back to anyone else. I set it on the desk in my apartment, the one I bought second-hand and refinished with my own hands. Then I opened the drawer where I kept the small stack of important things. Some legal forms. My lease term mortgage. A few letters from Victor about sponsorship for the next level of school. And beneath it all, the one piece of paper that had followed me through every turn of this story. Miranda's first law school tuition receipt. I stared at it like it was a relic. Not of her, but of who I was when I printed it. Exhausted, hopeful, wide-eyed in a way that made betrayal feel impossible. That receipt was dated 5 years ago. A payment of $3,920.47. I remember the exact moment I made it, sitting in a break room still smelling of fryer oil, my thumb hovering over the confirm transfer button. At the time, it felt like planting seeds in the soil of our future. Back then, every dollar I spent on Miranda was an investment in both of us. It took me a long time to realize I was investing in a future that didn't include me. But I kept that receipt, not out of bitterness, out of clarity. And now, as I sat with my own certification, I finally understood what to do with it. I walked to the corner shop that framed sports jerseys and diplomas and old wedding photos people couldn't bring themselves to toss. The woman behind the counter was older, her glasses sliding halfway down her nose. "I want these framed together," I said. She took the two documents, the tuition receipt and my certification, and placed them side by side. "Any special matting or message?" she asked. "Yes." I paused. "Make it clean. No gold. Just black. Underneath, I want the words, 'Invested in someone else.' Learn to invest in myself." She looked up, surprised, but nodded. "That's powerful," she said softly. I left it with her and walked back out into the spring air, light filtering through the tree canopies in the way that makes everything feel freshly rinsed. The city was alive with sounds, construction and car horns, vendors calling out, kids laughing. It all felt distant, like background music to the quiet rhythm of something new growing inside me. Later that night, I met Victor at a small restaurant to celebrate. Not my certification, but the finalization of my new position. Site-led, no longer just a pair of hands. Now a voice, a name on plans, a man people reported to, not just worked beside. "You earned this," Victor said, lifting his glass. "I watched you pull yourself out of a ditch most people get buried in." I lifted mine in return. "You gave me a shovel." He chuckled. "Nah, you built the ladder." We didn't talk about Miranda. Not anymore. Her name didn't come up much these days. I hadn't heard anything new about her. Just whispers that she'd taken a job at a small family-run firm in upstate New York. A far cry from Hallstrom and Knox. She'd gone quiet online. Deleted all the photos from Paris. No more captions about upgrades or circles. I didn't feel smug about it. I didn't need to. The best revenge is peace. And peace, I'd found, doesn't come when the other person loses. It comes when you no longer care if they win. The following weekend, I picked up the framed piece from the shop. It was perfect. The receipt and diploma side by side. No frills. Just truth. I hung it above my desk. Not where everyone could see it. Just where I could. I sat in that room for a while, letting the silence settle around me. I thought about all the versions of myself I'd shed to get here. The man who begged for love, who poured himself dry, who smiled through dismissal and folded his pride into apologies he didn't know. That man was gone. What remained was someone I respected. A man who didn't need to be seen by the world to know he mattered. A builder. Of structures. Of futures. Of himself. I picked up my pencil and opened my course binder for the next semester. Structural analysis. Concrete design. Project management. The kind of things no one would hand me. The kind of things I'd claim brick by brick. From the outside, my life didn't look like much. A modest apartment. A used truck. A bookshelf filled with library rentals. But I knew what it took to earn peace. I knew the cost of betrayal and the currency of resilience. That night, I went to bed early. No notifications buzzing. No wondering when she'd come home. No walking on eggshells. Just the hum of a life that was mine. Entirely mine. I reached for the light switch and let the room fade to dark, a quiet smile settling across my face as I whispered to the air. Paid in full. And finally, it felt true.